But I think it's time to do our
Yeah,
intro
we should
now.
start the episode.
Welcome to the We Weren't There podcast. I am your co-host, Ben.
I'm your other co-host, Max.
And today is another presentation from moi. This time, I wanted to talk about a subject that I find interesting in most contexts, but especially in a historical context. Doing more research into it, I've only found myself more interested in it. Impostors. People who fake being other people. Specifically, this one, I didn't do it on purpose, but it turned out to be mostly like royal imposters because, I mean, that form of government lends itself to motivating people to pretend to be other people, I find. But I picked out some interesting cases that I think will enlighten us on imposters throughout history, how they work, and how that might inform how we might see them today, especially in a world that doesn't exactly have as much importance in monarchy as it used to. Though heredity is still, I think, important in this day and age.
Much harder to fake nowadays, though.
Oh, much harder to fake. That's the other aspect. You got to be really skilled if you want to be an imposter. But you'll see back then, very different. Very different. very easy, but also very difficult in some interesting ways. Sorry?
I was just going to ask, like, how are they arranged? Are we doing them in, like, chronological order, or is it more just by...
I mean, how did I arrange them? I'll start off by saying most of them are Russian. That wasn't on purpose. It just turned out that way.
Turns out to be there's a lot of Russians.
That's just the stories that I found most interesting, honestly. They're not all Russian. I think I got 1, 2, 3 non-Russians. And others who may not be Russian, but...
Pretended to be Russian.
Pretended to be, but also maybe not. We'll talk about it. First of all, are there any imposters you want to shout out first, just quickly? Can you think of any that you are aware of?
I mean, there's the classic, like, Anastasia.
Yes. And that will be brought up.
After the Romanov family's killed, there's, like, I think there's more than one person that claims to be her.
Oh, there are so many, Max.
You
have no idea how many people claim to be
there's a Disney
Romanov.
movie about her surviving. Is it a Disney movie?
I think the studio was bought by Disney later, but it wasn't produced as a Disney movie. It's on Disney Plus, though.
Yeah, that's one of the ones I know. Other than that, not really.
No.
Off my head.
Then you'll learn some more, and people listening today will also be learning more. First, I'll talk about one that has actually been brought up on the show before, though very shortly. I believe it is in our second episode that we brought up Nero, and how people believed that he was still alive.
Oh, yes.
Even though he was...
I think you mentioned that.
Almost likely very much dead. I think I was re-listening to it recently, and you had brought up Nero, but then I kind of went on a tirade about some guy pretending to be Nero. I was wrong. It was 3 guys who pretended to be Nero. Well, possibly 3 guys.
Nero is
probably 2, but probably even more than that, but 2 that we know of.
Nero is actually just 3 guys in a trench coat.
Actually, no, they're all the same. They're all Nero, actually. Never mind. They're all the same person, really. You'll see. These we really don't have much information on. We just have, like, certain lines and, like, paragraphs from ancient sources, which, unfortunately, most of them aren't corroborated by others, except for 2 and 3, who it seems some people think it's 2 different ones. Some people think it's the same. I am of the opinion that it's the same one, just that, like, the time, like... just because the times aren't specific, but it's around the same time, and the contexts are very similar, just their endings are a bit different.
When you say Nero imposters, are these people who, after Nero dies, come out and say, I'm actually Nero, I actually survived?
Yes, exactly, because I'm not sure how aware you are of, like, the Year of the 4 Emperors and the fall of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, but it was a very turbulent time. Like I said, Year of the 4 Emperors. There was a year in which there were 4 emperors, which ended with the Flavian dynasty basically being established. They were, I believe, was it Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, until it went over to the 5 good emperors. Was it the Nero-Antonine dynasty, I believe it's called. But yeah, turbulent time. And again, because this is now a hereditary system of government as opposed to the Roman Republic, who you are matters a lot when it comes to power. And apparently there were a few that, especially at the end of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, there was a lot of cachet in being a Julio-Claudian, because at this point the idea was that, except for some women, the men were basically wiped out. So
there's no, like, real viable successor.
Yeah, and exactly. The truth of that depends on how much you believe later propaganda, because a lot of this is that, later emperors wouldn't have liked you to know that there were more Julio Claudians.
And they wipe them a bit from history and destroy their monuments and
Which
stuff.
this is going to be a problem with like almost all the imposters we're going to talk about. But for this section, I just have the quotes of these. First, we have false Nero number 1.
Is that how he's referred to?
That's how I refer to them. If you go on Wikipedia, they're like pseudo Nero, false Nero, whatever. But before then, I'll just say the fact that Nero didn't die in general was actually a fairly popular idea, especially among Greeks and like Anatolians, like people living in Asia Minor. A lot of them also being Greeks.
Would you say that theory that he didn't die have any historical? Like, does that hold any historical weight today? Is there anyone out there who think this is a good chance that he
The
really
thing
didn't
is,
die?
it would later be picked up by Christians, but in negative context.
Yeah, because
you know the idea of the Antichrist and all that. That comes from the idea that Nero didn't die. That like kind of feeds into that other idea, which is why we know that idea is still around. Is because at first, the reason why this was very popular among Greeks and people in Asia Minor is that, I mean, Nero was an artist. That was like his whole thing. He wanted to be perceived as an artist. He like played at the Olympics and he made these new artistic games for that thing, which writers would kind of say was like kind of embarrassing. But it seems that people actually liked it because they were able to see like their emperor as kind of like a pure person, kind of performing an art.
But I know the reason the writers might say that is I know in Roman high society, being like an actor or participating in the arts is kind of like a how do I say this, like a uncouth. It's unfitting of a wealthy person. It's
unfitting
like
of a proper man, let alone an emperor.
It's like you're adopting it's beneath your social stature to participate in these kinds of things.
Exactly, and it's very Greek. And at this time, being very Greek wasn't as popular, despite the popularity of the Greek language and philosophy and all that. Being Greek was still
they used to enslave Greek tutors for their families.
Exactly, they were still below, even if they were like their ideas were respected. They were still like not really warriors. They weren't Roman. They didn't represent that kind of agrarian Roman ideal. The was it Cincinnatus? These famous figures. So the idea that he didn't die was already popular because he died, I mean, under mysterious circumstances. He was murdered. He was murdered away from, like, Rome. Well, I don't know if it was away from Rome, but it was, like, in a villa, most likely, though sources on that kind of disagree on the specifics of his death. All that kind of made it popular that he didn't die, especially because shortly before he died, I'd read a source that said he was on, like, a tour around Greece already and, like, doing these performances. So it was, like, very recent memories, almost like in disbelief of, like, he was just here, and now apparently he's dead, and now his whole dynasty's being flipped over, like... This doesn't make any sense. And all the violence of civil wars and like governors and armies clashing. Again, the whole thing with the Julio Claudians is that it was the end of civil wars. That was part of the idea. And now there's civil wars again. Right. Kind of sucks. So when people hear, not only is Nero not dead, I am Nero. I'm here. Let's
fix this.
Let's fix this whole thing. A lot of people, especially in the East, again, Greece, Anatolia, would picked up on this. So first we have from Tacitus, who describes the first false Nero that we have recorded. About this time, Achaia and Asia were terrified by a false rumor of Nero's arrival. This is the first successor to Nero. This is around the time that Galba is emperor. He doesn't last very long. Again, year of 4 emperors. But again, this was the beginning of the turmoil. Nero was just killed, apparently, but not really, actually, because here's Nero right here. The reports with regard to his death had been varied, and therefore many people imagined and believed that he was alive. The forces and attempts of other pretenders we shall tell as we proceed, but at this time a slave from Pontus, or, as others have reported, a freedman from Italy, who was skilled in playing on the kithara and in singing. By the way, this is a constant thing, is that one of the ways people would prove that they were Nero is that they were really good at singing and playing like the lyre or like some other instrument, is that being an artist that was so part of Nero's identity that people had to be convinced by him by having their imposter actually be a good artist. So I found that very interesting, just goes to show how kind of important it was to how people saw him, especially among his supporters. Gained the readier belief in his deceit through these accomplishments and his resemblance to Nero. He recruited some deserters, poor tramps, who he had bribed by great promises and put to sea. A violent storm drove him to the island of Cynthus, where he called to his standard some soldiers who were returning from the east on leave, or ordered them to be killed if they refused. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically this goes on. They're on this island. Eventually, Galba kind of sends, I think it's like an admiral and a general. The admiral, like he tries to convince the admiral to join him, but the general stops it, and he ends up getting killed, and his head ends up being like paraded around. I think it is, paraded around Asia, and then in Rome, just say like he's dead. You know,
Hoorah.
Stop trying to do this, or else this will be you too. So that's the first one. But actually, I lied. He didn't die. That head was a fake, because actually he's alive again. We have this from Cassius Dio. This is this is after the Year of the Four Emperors. This is when supposedly Titus, but also possibly Domitian, it's hard to tell, was in power, likely under Titus. But there's another one which is another. I'll get to it. But probably under Titus. In his reign, also the false Nero appeared, who was an Asiatic named Terentius Maximus. He resembled Nero both in appearance and in voice, for he too sang to the accomplishment of the lyre. Again, you had to be a good singer who could play the instrument to be a Nero. He gained a few followers in Asia, and in his advance to the Euphrates attached a far greater number, and finally sought refuge with Artabanus, the Parthian leader, who became of his anger against Titus. Both received him and set about him, making preparation to restore him to Rome. So there was this legitimate plot from the Parthians. They were like, we have this Nero. We don't like the Flavians, the new Roman guys in charge. They say like, oh, it's because they liked Nero so much, some sources say, but it's like, no, they probably just wanted to destabilize Rome. That's probably the big reason, yeah. Also, they didn't conquer Rome before, so any new leader who they weren't sure about, it's better to go back to the guys who weren't able to hurt Parthia at all. But in this source, Cassius Dio also says that basically he kind of gets revealed who he is, and then the Parthian leader is so upset that they have him killed. They have the imposter killed. That's one story. I also have this other one, which I don't know why I don't have my source here, but I'll put it in the description. It's a later source. This is supposedly some people think it's the third false Nero, but I'm kind of the opinion that it's actually the second one, just a different telling of the story. In fact, 20 years later, when I was a young man, a person of obscure origin appeared who gave out that he was Nero, and the name was still in such favor with the Parthians that they supported him vigorously and surrendered him with great reluctance.
Yeah, I kind of find it hard to believe that they would...
they fell for it twice.
Yeah. It's probably a different telling of the same. You're probably right.
Exactly. I'm thinking that there was... Again, Cassius Dio was very much in the government. He probably wanted to be like, oh, they killed him. It makes less thing. It's like we did have nothing to do with it. We didn't know anything. Well, in this one, it's really kind of like they gave him up.
They're like, oh,
reluctantly.
He's lying. Oh, yeah.
They say with great reluctance. So it's likely they were trying to use him, but then I don't know. The Romans threatened
to invade or something. Yeah,
something like that. This is, but the time of this is supposedly around the reign of Domitian, not Titus, who's Titus's successor, his brother. But I mean, having your times mixed up, especially because they're so like close to each other, I don't think it's like that weird to think that he probably just had his years mixed up.
Yeah.
Or someone.
Or it was just kind
of
unclear. Yeah.
Like again, maybe Cassius Dio was thinking Titus, because again, both of these are like quite a few years later. I believe at least like 50 years later. So it might just be like they got two years wrong or whatever. Either of them. I think this is the same case. I don't know which one's real. Doesn't really matter. I just think it's funny. An imposter Nero, the Parthians were going to use them, and then they didn't end up using him. So that's all the false Neros that we know of. But considering how popular this belief was, I'm sure there were more.
Just
none that were lost to history, unfortunately.
Yeah, or weren't notorious enough to get mentioned in historical writings, or historical writings that no longer exist.
Exactly. But yeah, what do you think about
that? Interesting. I didn't know he was so popular. Greeks
again, especially among Greeks, Greeks being admirers of art and all that. It's really among the high class, especially in Rome,
that he's disliked.
And later Christians, which doesn't help with his image being antichrist and all that.
Because he was responsible for a lot of persecution
of the Christians specifically. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
That's why.
And the story of him burning Rome, likely false.
Probably like. Because that happens in all Roman writing, though. If you look at it, they'll just like degrade whoever came before them, and whoever they replaced, they'll be like, "Oh, they were so decadent," and like
exactly. And especially him being the last of his dynasty, especially helps for future Roman emperors would have made him look bad.
To
Christians
legitimize
later
their
made
own
him look
rule.
bad. He was popular among laymen, so aristocrats probably just wanted to make him look bad. You know, I'm not going to say he was perfect. He was an emperor.
But
like,
did he appoint a horse as his consul?
No, I think that was his uncle or cousin. Now, the Julio Claudians are so incestuous. I have no idea which one
Wasn't
it
it
is.
Nero who did that? Or was it...
It's Caligula.
It's Caligula. Yeah, right. My bad.
It's
Mixing up my
Bootsy.
emperors, yeah.
But
that also might not be true.
that also might not be true. But considering that, for his case specifically, he was definitely, I mean, probably messed up from childhood because of his
he was
childhood.
a little more nutty. But I heard
Yeah.
that one interpretation might have been he wanted to give an honorific rank to his horse, and people blew that out of proportion.
Interesting case, I think,
Yeah.
especially because, you know, Nero being such a terrible, like, ruler, being kind of the consensus for such a long time, we have these accounts here which kind of show that's probably not the whole like it's been here the whole time. They've had these accounts forever of people pretending to be Nero and leading others. Like,
And if he was so terrible, why would anyone follow?
yeah. I mean, demonic influence, I guess, would be some like Christians.
It's the forces of Satan, actually.
Maybe.
That would make a great like historical fiction novel.
I'm sure.
If he was actually like.
I think there is a historical fiction novel about a fake Nero. I think when I was looking it up, I think I did run across that. I can't judge the book's quality, but look into that if you will. But unfortunately, in terms of historical accounts,
There's very little.
there's very little. Those are the only accounts we have of false Neros. But moving on, this one is such an interesting story that I wish I could dive more into, but unfortunately, a lot of like the good sources on this person are not in any of the languages I know. But I'll just, I guess, give a brief overview of this guy. This guy's called Shepin Mali, and he is the first and only ever czar in the history of Montenegro.
Interesting. So he became czar?
He became the Tsar of Montenegro, like legitimately. That's not an imposter thing. He became the Tsar. He was the leader of Montenegro for about 5 years.
And in what time period?
This would be around the time of Catherine the Great.
Okay.
So it was like early 1700s. I think it's like between the crossover of 16th to 17th century. I think I have the dates here, actually. Do I? Yeah, no, actually, no. It's the late 18th century here. 1773 is when his reign ended.
Okay.
And he started, was 1768. So completely wrong about that. It was the mid to late 1700s here. So you might be wondering, how does that work? He claimed, well, actually, no, that's not true. He never claimed, but he was believed to be Peter III, as in the Tsar of Russia.
Russia, Peter III.
Who, The Great, the show on Amazon Prime, is
played by Nicholas Hoult, right?
Implied by Nicholas Hoult, yeah. Not a very historically accurate show, but his character is based on some truth. And I should think that it should be clear by the fact that Catherine the Great, his German wife, is the one who successfully overthrew him and became a much more
Does she have him
well-regarded.
killed? Is that how he dies? Or is he just like put into
Most likely, but it's not
It's
known.
unclear.
He was exiled, basically, and then he was later assassinated. Unclear 100% if it was entirely orchestrated by Catherine the Great,
But at least with
she definitely
tacit approval,
benefited
yeah.
from it. So you can imagine, well, actually, first of all, he arrives, again, his whole backstory is unclear, like a lot of these imposters that I'll
kind of
later
helps
say.
if they don't know where you're from. And
Exactly. He arrives in like the Venetian Albania, which is kind of bordering Montenegro, and he's kind of a healer, and like with herbs and stuff.
Like a mystic.
He's kind of a mystic, but it does seem like he was
Rasputin.
legitimately good. He was very good at like using medicine, basically,
Okay.
at like a time when not a lot of people were good at that. So people already liked him because he was a healer, and I guess he was successful enough to get people to like him. And he was able to basically kind of around this time, the Montenegro was ruled by a prince bishop, like under the Orthodox Church. It was again, it's very difficult to differentiate kind of independent territory around this time because
Yeah.
they're kind of between the Venetian Dalmatia territory and the Ottomans. And they're kind of able to carve out kind of independence, but also it's a lot of like clans, like Slavic clans around these like mountainous areas that are kind of
It's not like
not
a
worth
solid
much.
state. It's
No,
more-
it's really a bunch
very
of warring
malleable.
clans, which they're only able to kind of stay together by having this yearly assembly
Mm-hmm.
and technically being ruled by this prince bishop, which, because they're religious authorities, basically the only way they could agree on anyone ruling. Because all these clans would just kind of raid each other, and they weren't really a united force, but they also
They nominally
needed
recognized,
something
yeah.
to kind of combat the influence of these other powers. Again, I wish I had better sources for this, because I don't understand Montenegrin or any other Slavic language which talks about this, because also a few Serbian sources are also very interested in this history, and Russian ones, obviously. But,
None of which either of us speak, unfortunately.
Exactly. And it's kind of weird how he comes to power. Again, there's rumors that end up spreading that this guy, this healer in the Venetian territory, is Peter the Third. But he never actually claims to be. However, he never denies it. That's his thing. So it's not that he was so cool, people thought he was cool. It's that he would constantly act like he was Peter the Third. Like,
But he would never say, I'm Peter
exactly.
the Third.
There's this account where he's like in this Orthodox church, which they're talking about like Peter the Third and eventually like the family. And there's a painting of Peter the Third. Again, a lot of these people are very obsessed with Russia, because they're like basically the leader of the Orthodox Church at this point.
Right.
And Montenegro is like between the Catholics and Muslims in this little territory. That's why Prince Bishop's also so important, is that their religion is very much a centralizing force. And him being the Russian czar, people pay attention to that kind of thing, especially because, he was dead by this point, I believe, in 1768. So by the time he takes power, he's able to really claim that, actually, I'm not dead. That other guy that was assassinated, supposedly Peter the Third, wasn't. He never says it's him, but people believe it's him. And he has this thing where he like cries looking at a painting of Peter the Third. And again, he never denies that he's Peter the Third. So eventually he ends up at this kind of yearly assembly of the clans, and they successfully overthrow the Prince Bishop in favor of this guy who's actually, he ends up being kind of a good thing for the clans in a weird way. The reason that he's able to rule for 5 years is that because he's this kind of outside force, supposedly a czar of like such importance.
It's like a legitimizing force, but it's not like he's favoring one clan or the other. They don't have to pick like a...
Especially because a lot of people thought that the Prince Bishop was kind of Venetian allied kind of person. So they already knew that there was kind of influence. This guy was kind of an outside force. Even if he was influenced by anyone, it would be Russia, which is the kind of influence they wanted. And he's able to kind of successfully stop the infighting between the clans. So he ends up becoming the czar. And again, he's the only czar in Montenegrin history, which it's ridiculous. But yeah, he also did a bunch of stuff, like he adopted the first flag of Montenegro, like the first recorded flag. Later on, he would like instill the first census of Montenegro. He legitimately had some like good policies, but his kind of stint as supposedly being Peter the Third kind of ends because news of the first Tsar of Montenegro, Peter the Third, being in Montenegro, Catherine the Great hears about this, and while at first he's not really ruler, she doesn't really care because she's like, yeah, people are gonna pretend it's whatever. And then they learn he has power. She's like, oh shit, I gotta deal with this as soon as possible. So there's a bunch of attempts. There's like it's basically a diplomatic incident. And I said his name was Shepin Mali, which I think like roughly translates to like basically a lowly one on earth, or like a wanderer of earth. He always says like, oh no, I'm not Peter the Third. I'm just an inhabitant of this world. I'm just someone on this planet. That's why I'm saying he never denies it. He never says like his name. He just says, I'm just a person. I'm just a guy. Citizen of the globe, man. I'm just around.
It's like a hippie. He's just like, I'm just one with the band.
Yeah, except the way he does it makes himself seem like he's Peter the Third. It's so weird. So anyway, and he ends up the like a Russian representative basically comes into Montenegro, and trying to like figure out what the hell's going on. Like, first of all, it's like, is this guy actually Peter the Third? Because
step one,
it's like, you gotta identify that. And pretty quickly, these Russian representatives know what Peter the Third looks like. They go to Montenegro, because also part of this thing is that there's Montenegrins who go to Russia and like come back, either traders or like diplomats or whatever, who say this guy's Peter the Third. I'm not sure what the reason is for that.
What the motive?
It's just that it's apparently it was convincing. Exactly, we don't know what the motive is, but apparently it was convincing enough. This guy comes in, they immediately clock, like they write in their words, this is not Peter the Third. He does not look like Peter the Third. but it's still a problem that people in Montenegro think he is, because it like ends up stressing the Ottomans out, who become like, worried about like what this means, and is like Russia like kind of trying to increase its control or whatever. Venetians kind of hate having the Russian Tsar on their border. Again, it becomes a whole diplomatic incident. The Habsburgs are involved as well, but they end up like capturing him and basically have him like in a room. And again, there's this account where this representative, which, do I have his name here? No, I don't. Damn it. But basically, he's a representative of Russia, and he asks like, who are you? Like, why are you impersonating Peter the Third? And he says like, I never said I was Peter the Third. That's like the first thing he says.
Plausible deniability.
Exactly. It's just so like modern. Like, there's totally a modern response to that, which I find baffling, but also so funny. But after some time and under probably extreme duress, he ends up admitting that he's actually a Dalmatian or whatever, but he never actually says what his name is. So again, he says like, okay, I'm not Peter the Third. He admits he's not Peter the Third. He's just a Dalmatian guy, but he never says his own name. And then they kind of decide that even if some people think he's Peter the Third, it's actually kind of good to have kind of Russian allied person in Montenegro as opposed to the Venetian ally, the Prince Bishop. So they kind of let him go and end up like letting him serve anyway. He's like, as long as you're not saying you're Peter the Third,
it's fine.
It's fine. You're clearly like, again, your power comes from the appealing to people like the Orthodox Church, appealing to people like Russia,
good for the Russians.
Which is good for the Russians. And as long as you're not telling people you're Peter the Great, Peter the Third, not Peter the Great. Peter the Third was not great. Then it's fine. And he ends up, again, this is when he like ends up doing the census. Part of the reason also is that as soon as he's like captured and he's not ruling anything, the Montenegrin clans immediately start like attacking each other
again.
So he's also like, well, this guy's also clearly good at like uniting these clans. So I don't know what's up with him, but let's just leave him be. And he ends up only serving for like a few more years until 1773, when he's assassinated on the orders of the Ottoman Albanian governor Kara Mahmud Pasha. I just mentioned his name because he's also kind of an important figure. He ends up like going to war with like the Ottoman Sultan, and he's an interesting guy. But this isn't about him. It's about Chepin Mali, who is now dead. Sorry, and is unfortunately by the end of his life admitted he wasn't Peter the Third. Though to be fair, he never said he was Peter the Third. So I just wanted to include him because I just find the plausible deniability of, I never said I was Peter the Third.
Everyone just
so
believed
funny.
I was Peter the Third. I never said I was Peter the Third.
Yeah, but
Can't
it's
argue
still,
with that.
he had to still like pull his arm to be like, okay, fine, I'm not Peter the Third. I'm a Dalmatian guy. No, I'm not the hippy dippy person who's Peter the Third. But this isn't the only time people impersonating Peter III. Obviously, with the whole Catherine overthrowing. Have you heard of Pugachev's rebellion?
No.
He was this serf who ended up leading like a massive rebellion in Russia, and there's a whole crackdown by Catherine the Great. It kind of, a lot of historians see it as like kind of the end of Catherine the Great's attempt to kind of make like an enlightened absolutist state. Because at first he's like, oh, I'm enlightened. I should, put these ideas of representative government, a little like obviously not democracy, but
I'm
reforms.
like a philosopher king. I'm
Exactly.
a good
a philosopher queen.
Sorry, yes, I'm a good despot.
But Pugachev's rebellion, it's like, I think it's like thousands are executed. It becomes this big issue, and Pugachev claimed to be Peter III is like one of the big things, which I don't know how convincing that was,
or if that was just like another attempt to legitimize himself.
Again, he's another person who does not look at all like Peter III,
and,
but it's a way to legitimize himself.
Because I mean, it probably helps if you're not just like a serf leading a rebellion in a country where it's a hereditary monarchy.
Exactly. Which, speaking of Romanovs, Tsar Nicholas's family.
Yeah, all of them.
All of them have
Alexei,
at least like 5 imposters.
Alexei, Anastasia.
Yeah, it's...
Is there anyone that's impersonated Tsar Nicholas? I don't think so.
No, that one...
That's too obvious.
It's too obvious. You have to be a family member because they know the communists would have at least gotten Tsar Nicholas. That was the whole thing, Tsar Nicholas II. I didn't put any specific examples. There's so many. There's like Anna Anderson's a famous example of someone who impersonated Anastasia, but she like hopped from like sanitarium to like asylum. She's like clearly like mentally ill. It's unclear if she like really did believe she was, but her claiming to be kind of got her supporters and got people to like send her money so that she could, afford like going to these different places. It's kind of a sad story. But there's also like so many others. So many people do it obvious. Like there's one guy who wrote a book who was like, my foster grandmother said that she was Anastasia, but she told me not to tell anybody. And this is like in a book written in 2004. Which,
sure, buddy.
In case you don't know, Tsar Nicholas's family's bodies have been found.
Yeah, they found the
for a
room where
while.
they were executed as well, no?
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty quick, but they were trying to find their graves, like their bodies, so they could like do DNA testing and like identify them. So a lot of these came out before because people didn't know where their graves were, and the USSR wouldn't make that information public at all.
They didn't want to, like, it was the whole, like, we don't want to, like, have people go and, like, steal the remains and rebury them or,
exactly.
like, do, like, a...
But when the USSR fell, they pretty quickly found at least, like, Tsar Nicholas II, I believe, one or two of their children and his wife in, like, 1993. And then DNA testing after some time, they confirmed. And then the rest of them, which they were unclear exactly which daughter's which. I think as they found Alexei before, and they found like two daughters later in 2007, which they were able to identify.
That's pretty recent. I would have thought it would have been before that.
No, I mean, that's the thing is that we had like incomplete. We're like, we know that it's around there. It took them a long time to find the rest. And yeah, that's, since then, it's kind of difficult to be an imposter in Roms, but that's a big reason.
It's also so far away that they would be so old by now that it's...
Exactly, but that's kind of part of the reason the Romanovs specifically have so many imposters is that because their graves weren't found, no one could positively say,
they're actually dead.
They're right there.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, but now it is, so if anyone claims that, then
and they're not
shut
like
it down.
Hundreds of years old.
Yeah. But there is one specific one which I wanted to mention, another one other than Anna Anderson really quickly, which is Mikhail Goleniewski, Polish. I don't know how to speak Polish, but it's a very sad case because he claimed to be Tsarevich Alexei, who is the heir, the son,
of
the one that was put under the care of Rasputin.
Yeah, for his hemophilia.
Exactly. Yeah. Though, as far as I'm aware, Mikhail was also not a hemophiliac, so that by itself...
pretty damning evidence. But, Rasputin, mystical dude, probably healed that.
But the reason he claimed that later in his life is because he was severely, likely, mentally ill by the end of his life. And the reason why is because he was a Polish intelligence agent and spy who delivered information to MI6 and the CIA. So this was his career. This is before kind of his life fell apart. He was that. A lot of this is from like an Observer article, which is like promoting a book. So I don't know exactly how true the specifics are. Like he says, like he seemed ideologically motivated as opposed to motivated by like money that the CIA were offering, which I think I do believe considering the circumstances, because none of this was really like certain that he would get anything out of it other than just delivering information. But yeah, so he delivered information just to show how much of a mess the Cold War is. Apparently he tried to deliver information directly to the FBI and just for the FBI because he knew that the KGB had like informants in the CIA. The CIA was like crawling with him. He's like, I know if I send it to the CIA,
Someone's
it is not staying. So I'm going to send it directly to the FBI. However, the CIA intercepted these, and the FBI didn't receive most of them anyway because the CIA kept it from them. So the CIA ended up having it anyway, which is part of the reason everything falls apart, but I also don't know the truth of the FBI not really having Soviet spies either. I do believe they probably didn't have as much, but I don't know how.
It's the Cold War. All of those intelligence agencies on both sides.
Yeah, they're all compromised.
The Iron Curtain were full of moles and people.
And anyway, he's actually like very significant because he like gave very high quality information. He was actually able to legitimately expose the KGB spy leader in the MI6.
Okay,
which is big deal. And also
was that the Cambridge Five? No, it was before that. Eh?
No, it was before that. There was his name somewhere. I'll have this article in the description. But I'm not trying to focus on that guy. Also, the Portland spy ring, which I'm not super familiar with that, but
apparently
that's a spy ring in Portland. I'm assuming Oregon, and he exposed it. And he ended up defecting because he knew that the
can't really hang around
intelligence agencies and the KGB were after
Warsaw
him.
Pact
because turns out the CIA did get their information, and turns out the KGB agents in the CIA also got that information and information on who this guy is. But it's a weird situation where he was basically promised, money, citizenship in the U.S., but this other guy came in, this other Polish intelligence agency, and apparently convinced the CIA that all other informants were like false and like were giving false information and like weren't trustworthy at all, and they were like spies or whatever. It's like don't let them enter. So the CIA are basically like, oh, okay, then this guy, nope, the door's closed on you, even though they promised it. I have this quote from the writer of the book. Says his contract isn't renewed, his payments stopped coming in, and they take away the pistol they had provided for protection. And they know that his former masters in Warsaw and Moscow are looking for him at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So they
just hang
the
him
book
out
is
to
called
dry.
like leaving him out in the cold. Yeah, they're like
they hang him out to dry.
You gave us all this great information,
So
and
his
you're
move,
trying to protection.
His next move is I'm actually the Romanovs.
No, it's much sadder than that, actually. What ends up happening is that he ends up making his, like it says, caught in the CIA's web of deceit, Golowinski suffered an immense amount of financial and emotional distress and quickly started to lose his grip on reality. And by the mid-1970s, because it's in the 60s when this is happening, he was accusing prominent politicians of being long-dead Nazi or Soviet intelligence figures. He's becoming completely paranoid and gone completely insane. He died in 1993 in New York, still claiming he was Tsarevich Alexei.
So he had like he
has a psychotic breakdown because
he thinks he's going to be killed at any moment.
Exactly. He's being chased because, first of all, again, basically all the big intelligence agencies in the world know about him and are probably keeping tabs on him. I mean, the CIA are definitely still keeping tabs on him, even if they don't trust him and they aren't giving him anything. The KGB and Polish intelligence agency are definitely after him. So, he has a mental break, and it's probably at this point that he's like, okay, well, he's not, if we kill him now, it's like, it doesn't really have much use because
he's not really doing anything other than like off his rocker.
Yeah. So, it's kind of a sad story. The book's called The Spy Who Was Left Out in the Cold. The book makes these claims that he's like, oh, he's one of the best spies the best like informants that the CIA stuff already had, like has ever had at that point. And apparently there was still like some dossiers related to him that MI5 wouldn't give because they were still like actively important. Yeah. Again, these are all like promoting a book, so I don't know how true exactly all these like, especially these grand elements are, but it's an interesting story, and I think it kind of also shows that people who are imposters aren't necessarily doing it for their own gain. Sometimes they are legitimately convinced and having a difficult time, and there's a greater story there, and that these things are complicated. Speaking of complicated, the time of troubles. Do you know about this? Do you know what the time of troubles are?
In which country?
Russian history.
Very vaguely.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure you know it's a time of internal trouble. Yes. But the big basically result of this is that it's the end of the Rurik dynasty, which is like the Ivans, like Ivan the Terrible.
Yeah, the descent from the Vikings, right?
Kind of. Unfortunately, I didn't go through like all the detail of all the context from this, but it's the end of the Rurik dynasty, which is the one that makes the Tsardom, right? It goes from like the Muscovite princedom to a greater thing, a lot of territorial expansion. That's when it becomes a very important player under the Ruriks. But by the end of the time of troubles, it's the Romanovs that are in charge. And they end up being like married to some of the Ruriks and end up being like important aristocrats. And they end up on top after a lot of complications. This is the whole history of the time of troubles is not something I want to get into because that's something I can make 5 hours worth of content about reading this book. That's what I learned. But as we learned with Nero, when a dynasty ends and another one springs up, it's a great opportunity to become an imposter because people are looking for the legitimacy of the last dynasty. It's a way to gain power. It's also a way to like unite certain coalitions. We'll see how this goes, but first of all, you need to know about Dmitri. So Dmitri was the youngest son of Ivan the Terrible, Ivan the third or fourth, I forget, but Ivan the Terrible. Everyone knows that name. He's 8 years old when he dies under mysterious circumstances. He dies when the last Rurik, supposedly the last Rurik Tsar dies, which is Fyodor the First, and I believe it's like Fyodor is his brother.
Is he killed?
We don't know. Probably under one of the regents of Fyodor, because Fyodor was had like a bunch of regents. I don't
Because
know.
I'm noticing a pattern here that it's often people who are assassinated or killed. It's almost never someone who
Yeah,
dies
but
of
this
natural
one
causes.
I really can't say specifically. Again,
We don't know.
the problem with this whole thing you'll see is that not only are we dealing with imposters, but we're also dealing with a change in dynasty. In which case, the Romanovs would probably like to dissuade any idea that any Ruriks are still alive. That like they wouldn't research any of the Ruriks because the Ruriks aren't the Tsars anymore. It's the Romanovs. Don't look
Yeah,
into that stuff. They're not important anymore.
Who cares about that past dynasty?
Who cares? But also, they really care.
Yeah.
But anyway, dead. Most people agree.
He's dead.
Even now, he is dead as an 8-year-old. Again, likely murdered by Regent and future Emperor Boris Godunov, who's brother-in-law to Fyodor the First. And again, future. I said future Emperor. I think I was thinking of Nero. Future Tsar.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, Tsar is a...
Yeah, it's a derivation.
It's a derivation of emperor, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But, you know, when I said that he died as an 8-year-old, I
Yeah.
lied. He is actually alive. He is alive, and his life after being 8 years old is unclear.
Very
or
much.
before then, because probably not Dmitri. But this is going to be a story of a lot of imposters. But potentially raised by Cossacks, possibly just some kid that may or may not have actually been convinced that he was Dmitri. It's kind of unsure because a lot of the documents related to him were like destroyed. But he stayed low. Boris Godunov, who ended up being Tsar, kind of learned about him and basically like didn't really care too much. But when people gave him a bit of attention, ended up sending people to murder because
Can't have that.
yeah, because Godunov isn't a Rurik. He's not really like legitimate in that sense. Or at least his legitimacy is very much in question, and that's why he's trying to basically shut down any potentially
could
more
claim to-
legitimate
yeah.
claimant. Because of Fyodor,
The story of every monarchy ever.
exactly. Boris keeps power for a long time though, because he still does have this like married relation.
Yeah, he's not-
He's not.
there's a reason he's in
completely
power.
disconnected. He's not just some aristocrat. He is related, but he does have this illegitimacy, which will plague him and will end up causing the time of troubles. Which already starts now because aristocrats are kind of uppity and they're not happy that this non-Rurik is in power.
charge, yeah.
The time of troubles has begun, but the civil wars of the time of troubles
Haven't begun.
which is what ends up being the big result, isn't happening yet. So anyway, Dmitri, the totally real Dmitri, ends up fleeing to Poland-Lithuania because it's right on the border, and they
They're enemies of Russia.
exactly. So he successfully runs away, possibly with a monk named Grigory Otrepyev, which, again, this whole thing is complicated. We're dealing with a lot of propaganda from different people. One of Boris Godunov's like things that he does is that he investigates who this Dmitri really is.
Yeah.
They didn't really find anything concrete because he's very low key existence. No
Well,
one's
so if
really
you're
able to
some
find
peasant
out.
born in a medieval village, there's not a
Exactly.
whole lot of evidence.
But he's
about-
claimed to be Grigory Otrepyev, who may have actually been someone who kind of helped him escape. It might actually be him. It might be some other guy who's not related, who's this monk who runs away from Russia for whatever reason. Probably he does this regardless of like concrete evidence because a runaway monk is like not very respected. Like it's like
It's a bad look.
it's a bad look.
But if he's running away with the true heir of
Yeah,
Russia,
but no, what he's saying is that he is the fake heir is this monk. He's a runaway monk who's claiming that he's
Oh, I
Dmitri.
see.
He's an insane person
see.
who shouldn't be trusted, is what the claim is.
I see.
But again, possibly just like someone he ran away with, possibly not. This whole thing is dealing with a lot of propaganda and accounts that aren't trustworthy. But what we know, Dmitri ends up in Poland-Lithuania. That is basically for sure. The real Dmitri, totally real Dmitri, who was not dead at 8 years old, but is in Poland-Lithuania.
Right.
And through a lot of meetings with some like landowners on the border with Russia. Sorry.
How old is he at this point, the totally real Dmitri?
I'm not. I mean, his real age would be unclear if
I know,
he's
but
not Dmitri.
He's like an adult, right? He's not
Yeah,
like some
this is around. I believe it's like 1604. So it's around the change from 1500s to 1600s. the real Dmitri dies at this like 1580 something, I believe.
Okay, so he's in his like 30s.
So he's in his 30s to 40s, and he ends up actually convincing people. Some people are probably actually convinced. Some people probably think that he's a very useful tool.
Yeah, this is politically expedient for us.
This is a lot of, again, this is where a lot of like, we don't know anything because who really believed him, who didn't. We don't know.
Stuff you can't know. You can't know the motivations.
Exactly,
of people. But we do know that people said they believed he was
exactly.
the real Dmitri.
But while these kind of aristocrats, and he gets some Cossacks, this is around like the steppe, where still the Zaporozhian hetmanate would become like a political force. He ends up gathering a lot of Cossacks, a lot of Polish supporters. These they call them like freebooters, kind of like in the U.S. when like a bunch of them tried to invade Latin America for whatever reason. But they end up trying to convince the king of Poland-Lithuania, Sigismund III Vasa, who kind of wanted to, because he had just lost the kingdom of Sweden. Because at first he was the king of Sweden and Poland-Lithuania, and he'd lost Sweden. He was like, well, if we get this guy in Russia, an ally, because we help them, then we could end up getting back Sweden because he'll help us do that. But the Polish, like his prime minister and stuff, end up like dissuading him from that because they're like, we don't want to get us through more trouble. We just had this whole war with Sweden instead of causing a war with Russia. Let's not do this.
Oh yeah, I'm just remembering what happens in that war, and yeah, that was a pretty big disaster for them, right?
Yeah, it didn't end up going well. Sweden ends up like, I think, claiming like Livonia, which is like Estonia, Latvia, and some portions of modern Lithuania. It really doesn't go well for Sigismund Vasa. Again, this is I'd love to go through the context of early modern Eastern Europe, but
no time.
No time.
Another episode.
Important thing is, he comes in. His army is mostly like Polish freebooters with some Cossacks, and in 1604, 1605, they invade Russia. Not as Poland-Lithuania, just as the totally real Dmitri.
Like, I'm the legitimate successor.
Exactly. This is the first civil war of the time of troubles. This is what
kicks it off really into high gear.
This is what hits the dominoes start coming down. This is at first Boris isn't really concerned with it because he's like, oh, it's like an army of less than 4,000 people, and he has this like trained army. This is one of the things that Russia is known for, especially under Ivan the Terrible. They have an actual trained professional
like a standing army.
I don't know if it's a standing army,
but at least professionalized, not feudal levies.
Exactly, and these guys are feudal levies from like nowhere Poland. Although Cossacks were known to be fierce warriors, which is why it probably would be cause for concern. The other thing that's cause for concern is that the Russian towns they came into, because they didn't have any resistance, believed Dmitri.
I see.
This
which is concerning for the Tsar.
Again, unclear how many of these people were truly convinced that it was Dmitri, and how many people just hated Boris.
Yeah, just hated Boris already because he's already.
This becomes a big thing. There are definitely people who did not believe it was Dmitri, especially a lot of like the higher class people in court who would have probably known someone who knew Dmitri, but
it's convenient.
It's convenient
for people who don't like the ruling. The current ruler.
Also, I forgot to mention, but Dmitri also secretly converts to Catholicism. It's kind of a deal that he makes, which whether or not he took it seriously, unclear, but
scandalous.
According to the Polish, he was Catholic, which Russia, Eastern Orthodox, Poland, Lithuania, Catholic, not necessarily in agreement on a lot of things. But this isn't important right now. For now, especially peasants don't really know about it. They don't really care. A lot of them just don't like Boris because of his taxes or because he's not a Rurik. Dmitri is a Rurik. He's a, real guy. He has this story that like an angel saved him from like an assassin, and he was like the story of how he survived is that he was basically taken in by like a monk because of like God warned him through like signs of the divine. So not only was he Dmitri, but he was also basically like divinely chosen
to rule Russia.
Rule Russia, basically. So especially a lot of people who believed that story were especially behind Dmitri. Again, this would be a lot of peasants, a lot of people, who would fight for him, but not necessarily the aristocrats. Most of the aristocrats didn't like Boris. So this invasion ends up being much more successful than most people probably thought. And also, the other thing that convinced a lot of people was that this false Dmitri seemed very well educated. He was very well spoken. He seemed to have had that kind of education, right? He seemed to have this regal quality.
Yeah.
Which, he wasn't just some like foul-mouthed guy who
commoner or whatever.
exactly he convinced people successfully that he was not only high class but that he was the thought dead Tsarevich, which Tsarevich is the term for like the heir of the Tsar. I also mentioned Tsarevich Alexei earlier, but that's what that means. He was the rightful Tsarevich. So this invasion ends up being pretty successful, but by the time Boris takes him seriously, they do end up facing very serious resistance, and his army ends up taking some really big blows. It doesn't seem like it'll actually work, this kind of early rising up. It will have caused these rebellions, which Boris will have to deal with, but it doesn't seem like they'll make it to Moscow or anything. Then Boris dies.
Oh.
Suddenly. Probably not a murder or anything. It seemed like a health thing.
It's actually divine intervention.
It might. I mean, that's
Dmitri was chosen by God.
We'll see how that goes. So the heir of Boris is his 16-year-old son.
Not a good start.
Not a good start. And basically around this time, because Dmitri has so much support from the people, a lot of people already didn't like Boris, who was not a Rurik, but whatever, he was kind of tied. This 16-year-old boy is definitely not popular, and his regents, whoever are chosen, actually he probably doesn't have regents because he's 16, but either way, people around him, especially his mother, would probably get some support. People don't like this. A mob basically ends up killing Fyodor II, is the name of the 16-year-old boy, and his mom, when Dmitri is allowed to arrive in Moscow. And then he's proclaimed the Tsar of Russia. The totally real Dmitri ends up becoming the Tsar of Russia.
This is the first successful one we've had on the, the episode.
Shep and Molly, right?
True, Shep and Molly was true. But he had to admit he wasn't the real.
That's true. Dmitri the First would, Dmitri would never have the chance to admit that he wasn't. Again, it's unclear if even he believed that he was Dmitri. It's unsure.
He claimed he was. He never recanted his claims.
He never recanted it.
That he was Dmitri.
But he was proclaimed Tsar in like mid-1605. It was either, I think it was June, July, something like that, in the summer. And he ends up ruling Russia for the first few months. This is, again, I know I keep repeating this. It is a very important point. It is completely impossible to tell what is the truth and what is the later fiction written about this rule. Because, first of all, it lasts less than a year.
Right.
It lasts until mid-1606, I believe, in May. And a lot of later sources would say that he was like way too Western. Like he was Catholic and he was trying to convert the whole country. And he was this crazy person who like tried to take advantage of his like position, all that stuff. But the source I read was unconvinced by this. First of all, because he'd lasted still just about a year, which is kind of difficult to do if, and especially in a very deeply religious country.
We're all Catholic now.
Exactly. Because he did bring Jesuits with him. That was kind of part of the deal he made with a lot of these like aristocrats from Poland who supported him. Also important to mention, he ended up like being married to this Polish aristocrat. Very definitely Catholic. A lot more devout than Dmitri may or may not have been. But very difficult to tell what he really was doing. It seems like the people liked him because it was kind of going back to the Ruriks, because this person was divinely chosen.
And the other guy was struck down by God, for all we know. So.
Yeah, exactly. The aristocrats kept him around because they kind of stopped the chaos.
Yeah, it calmed things down.
It calmed things down. They were likely frustrated. They probably couldn't like penetrate his inner circle because he'd been away for so long. He
had his own kind of
trusted advisors. He probably had some people who supported him during the rebellion because there were these aristocrats who supported him early on, who he basically stuck around. But he's popular among the populace, and he was also very popular in the army because he was seen as this kind of warrior prince. Because he came in like leading armies. That was also the thing. During this rebellion, he wasn't just standing back. He was at least seen as a person who was leading armies to retake Russia. So he was very much respected
in the military
because of this. Because, like, again, they'd lost some battles. He'd kind of had to retreat. He went through, like, a bit of probably some hunger here and there. He was kind of down to earth in a weird way, even though he was also this divinely chosen.
But he's both at the same time. He's both ordained by God to rule Russia, but he's also like been in the trenches with the soldiers.
Exactly. So he's just kind of this perfect mix, and it seemed like he was kind of perfect because of that, at least as Tsar of Russia, and also because of the Polish connection, even if people weren't a fan of the influence, it seemed like there was some benefit in that, like, relations were pretty good with Poland-Lithuania while he was there.
Wars and
Exactly. So good, in fact, that he does end up almost going to war with Sweden
to give them
to help. Like, it's unsure like what the exact reasons for it is. Probably to help Sigismund, but actually no, it was to take a port in Livonia, like in modern day Estonia, because apparently the Swedes had taken like a port city that like a fort that they really needed throughout like all the chaos. But it doesn't end up doing that. Instead, he ends up almost invading the Crimean Khanate because it's Islamic, and he's like, okay, being the divinely chosen person of Russia, I'll be this theocratic warrior, again, warrior prince chosen by God. I'm gonna fight the
Crimeans and convert them to Orthodoxy.
Exactly. But behind all this, there was a plan to assassinate him taking place, and he ends up being assassinated before this invasion could take place. This is how it goes. We actually have I have this account of how the assassination goes.
Went. Okay.
So the Tsar and a few guards retreated to an inner room and locked the doors. While the attackers broke the doors down, Dmitry shouted a quick warning to his bride and her ladies-in-waiting, who were in an adjacent room. And then he attempted to jump from a window to a nearby building, but he slipped and fell to the ground far below, which broke his leg. Had he made it to the other building and managed to reach the crowd pouring into the Kremlin to save him, there is little doubt that he would have survived. As Massa put it, the townspeople would have massacred the lords and conspirators. As it turned out, the dazed Tsar was temporarily rescued by a few nearby Streltsy, who were kind of like military police kind of in the city, who opened fire on the assassins as they rushed forward to finish their task. The Streltsy managed to kill one or two traitors before being overwhelmed by them. Tsar Dmitry pleaded with the assassins to ask his mother if he was the real Dmitry, or to take him to Red Square and let him speak. The assassins, however, could not afford to bring him before the people. Fearing the rapid approach of crowds of Tsar Dmitry's loyal subjects, the traitors quickly killed the Tsar. Under the gaze of Vasily Golitsyn, a merchant named Milnikov denounced Dmitry as a heretic and shot him. Then the assassins hacked the Tsar to death, leaving at least 21 wounds and smashing in his skull. So ended the life of a remarkable person.
And I'm just curious, did the crowd end up lynching all these perpetrators, or did they get away?
No. The leader behind this conspiracy ends up becoming Tsar.
Okay.
I don't know what happens to the specific people here.
No, but they weren't like immediately mobbed and killed.
No. What did happen is that the corpse of Dmitry was left out in the public for 3 days. And they're unsure who took it back. They
Somebody
purposefully left it out to be like, here lay a disgrace, like it was a kind of humiliation.
Yeah, because he's not being buried or whatever. He's like...
Exactly.
But there riots?
Kind of. Again, this was like a lot of crackdown oppression because now there's this new Tsar who now is trying to...
Now has to solidify his power.
Exactly. And this person has no connection to any of the other...
He's even less
things.
legitimate.
He's less legitimate.
Totally
his name is like Vasily Shuisky. And Shuisky is, again, an important like boyar family. He's like in the court. But not really a great connection. So even less legitimate than Boris Godunov.
Let alone Dmitry.
Exactly.
Ordained by God himself.
But rumors started to float that this person who is dead, his corpse, was not the real Dmitry.
Oh my God. Wait. So so they're assuming that the guy who was in charge before is Dmitry. When they're saying that his corpse wasn't Dmitry, they mean the guy who was previously Tsar.
Yes.
Okay. So he's still alive, is what they say.
He is still alive. I don't know what you're talking about. He is still alive.
A
French merchant said they couldn't recognize the corpse as Dmitry.
Probably because he was
stabbed
27 times or whatever.
His skull was crushed,
but
it's not. Regardless, this inspired a lot of people to end up becoming imposters. Because Dmitry, again, a lot of people really didn't believe him. Even if they did believe him, they didn't really. And now that he was dead, there's a kind of vacuum. The rebellion was starting again.
It's like...
and everyone kind of wanted the place of Dmitry.
Do you know the movie Spartacus where they're like, I am Spartacus. No, I am Spartacus. It's the same thing.
Yeah, except they don't all claim to be the same person. You see, what happens is... let me give you imposter number 2. False Peter. Which, again, the author wrote every time it's like someone who probably isn't the person they say they are. They put false.
Yeah, it's like
false Dmitry. False. They have like... false Dmitri and false Dmitri 2 later.
Well,
we'll see.
there's more than one.
Exactly. So we got false Peter, a supposed secret son of Fyodor the First, who was the last real Rurik.
Legitimate
right?
Rurik. Yeah.
Exactly. He's a leader of another rebellion, and he was almost definitely like a Cossack who he was like chosen in his group because he like resembled.
They're like,
some
you
of
look
the-
mostly like this guy.
Exactly. He started kind of as a minor rebel leader, as kind of a pawn for like the other Cossack leaders who used him, but he ended up allying with false Dmitri the First. So he actually came out as this supposed person before. Basically, he was saying like, "I'm gonna follow my definitely real uncle into this war," and
There's two of them.
and he supported Dmitri the First when he was Tsar. He ends up becoming like a more major rebel leader later. Then there's false Ivan August, supposed secret son of Ivan the Third and his fourth wife, who in reality they never had children, and she ended up being like sent to a convent after their divorce. Totally a mutual decision. But this guy claimed to be basically the brother of Dmitri. Then we have the totally real Dmitri, who actually never died. I don't know what you're talking about. Who was accused to have been a baptized Jewish man named Bogdan. Again, another thing to discredit him. It's probably not true.
Yeah.
But instead of a runaway monk, that's the one they went with.
He's
Again,
actually Jewish.
at this point, Vasily Shuisky does the same thing as Boris. So he like tries to investigate who this guy is. They end up not finding much. Though an account of how they found this guy, I found pretty interested. Basically, after Dmitri, the first Dmitri, or the second Dmitri, actually. The second Dmitri died. A lot of these rebel leaders were like, okay, clearly having Dmitri around is good. We need to find another Dmitri. So,
But it's all this fiction that no one really believes.
no, but some people do. That's why it works.
Really?
But not
But no
everyone.
But like no one, like very few people at the top or in any sort of position of power
Likely
must
not.
believe this. It must be more for the...
Likely not. And definitely the people, especially for second Dmitri. For the first Dmitri, there's a lot of like...
It's kind of believable.
It's kind of
but
believable.
the second time, like,
the
come
second
on.
time, not really. So ends up happening is that he's like, apparently he was like a poor teacher and he was caught sleeping with a higher class person's wife. Ends up being kicked out on the street. So he's like walking around at night, and this person who's a minor rebel leader ends up finding him. He's like, you look a bit. Like accounts say he doesn't look a lot, like he has a very vague resemblance to
If you like really squint, you kind of look like Dmitri.
That's exactly it. So they end up being like, all right, we're going to give you food and clothes, right? If you pretend to be Dmitri.
So they picked up a homeless guy.
Basically, but he says no. He says, no, I don't want to do this. So they end up throwing him in jail and forcing him to
Even
be
worse.
Dmitri.
They imprison a
They end
random
up putting him,
homeless guy.
they call it like training to basically be this higher class person who could believably be the Tsar Dmitri.
They picked up a random guy off the street. Like, you're Dmitri now.
This might be a story spread that's not really real,
Yeah.
basically to discredit Dmitri.
But my God, is it a good story?
But it's a very good story.
Probably why it was used.
Exactly.
'Cause I want to believe that. That's hilarious.
Yeah, so obviously, he ends up mostly being kind of a tool for these.
Yeah.
Because the thing is about the first Dmitri, he does end up becoming Tsar. He's a leader in this army. While he's not necessarily convincing everyone, he does end up having a leadership position in this whole thing.
Yeah, he's in charge.
Exactly. This guy, at least starting out, does not have that. He is just some guy who...
He's a figurehead. He's like, oh, we actually have the Dmitri. He's totally still alive.
Yes, exactly. He's mostly a tool of more powerful leaders, including a guy's named Ivan Bolotnikov and the false Peter that I mentioned earlier, who is, at this point is a pretty major rebel leader. He's a... Yeah. And unfortunately, though, these guys would end up being caught and surrendered in a city called Tula. Like, there's this big, again, there's a rebellion going on. There ends up being like a broad coalition, mostly. If you're against Vasily Shuisky, they mostly team up because they just need to get him off the throne, and then we'll figure out what happens later. But in Tula, there's the siege of the city. Ends up going very well for Vasily. And he makes this deal that basically if you give up your leaders, anyone else in the rebellion is allowed to go home and go free. And they ended up taking that. Even some of the leaders were like, okay, yeah, we're not going to... Like, Bolotnikov was, like, very personally, like, charismatic, and people liked him. And he's one of these people who was like, all right, let's go. Apparently, False Peter very much didn't want to go, and Bolotnikov had to tie him up with a rope to get him to go to Moscow. So what happens at this point is that they end up both being killed. First, it's false Peter ends up being hanged just outside of Moscow, specifically because he's claiming to be a Rurik. They're like, I don't care who he is, you're dead. Blotnikov, they hold on to him for a bit just because he's so popular that they don't really.
They don't want to just kill him because they're worried what'll happen, right?
And he doesn't have as much of a claim to the Tsardom. He's not claiming that he should be the rightful Tsar. He's just a leader, right?
Right.
And at this point, Russia's in such a mess already, which it gets worse, but.
Do you really want to give them? Like,
they end up making deals. Like people end up going to war with each other, end up becoming allies. It's a whole thing, depending on the situation.
It's a messy time politically.
So they hold on to Bolotnikov for now. They do end up killing him in secret, though, and because he's so popular and people weren't really convinced by the second Dmitri, this ends up really stunting his rebellion movement. But he ends up going into hiding. He's not captured. Dmitri's still alive. The totally real, definitely real Dmitri, still alive. Then another false person comes out called Fedor Fedorovich, a supposed younger brother of false Peter. So he's the second son
of the marriage that had no children.
Fourth wife. Well, what are you talking about? They had 2 children.
Oh, obviously. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they hung Peter.
Exactly. So this is another Cossack guy. So basically, they end up doing the same trick.
They're like, all right, well, first time doesn't work. Second time's the charm. All right.
Yeah, but despite this, with the help of this guy as well, the second false Dmitri ends up actually, once he goes into hiding, growing support. Because again, some people in these villages do believe that it's Dmitri. Again, divinely saved, divinely to become Tsar. He escaped death once by like divine intervention.
What's to say it couldn't happen again?
Exactly. He's basically Jesus. This wasn't a legitimate argument, but he was divinely chosen, clearly, if he's still alive. And what ends up happening is that his army becomes so big that Vasily Shuisky isn't able to take him down. But instead of trying to go to Moscow and like overthrow him, what they do is they set up shop in Tushino, which is like not too far from Moscow, and he ends up ruling as Tsar from here.
Okay.
And since again the other rebel leaders are killed now, he does end up having more of a leadership role, and he does end up claiming to be Tsar in this city of Tushino.
This guy they picked up off the street.
Supposedly possibly a baptized Jew named Bogdan. No last name given, just Bogdan.
Bogdan, who was disgraced for trying to sleep with someone of a higher class.
Exactly.
Now the Tsar,
with his wife.
The Tsar pretender.
Yeah, this pretender. And there ends up being 2 Tsars and 2 governments. This government in Tushino ends up like actually collecting taxes
in the
and
region.
like administrating parts of Russia. Eventually, it's claimed by this source that like half of Russia recognizes Dmitri more than Shuisky.
So really a civil war type situation.
It's a civil war, but they don't actually, for like a year, they don't actually like
Just an
seriously
awkward
try
situation,
to
yeah.
attack each other because they're both in such like, both of their claims are very weak.
Yeah, and no one wants to be the first one to strike. Right?
Exactly. And so it's just kind of a weird stalemate where they end up just hanging around.
There's 2 Tsars now.
During this time, Shuisky basically just puts in everything. He's like, all right, I'm going to solve this basically politically, diplomatically, not through military means. I'm going to go to the Polish people and say, stop supporting this false Dmitri because you're clearly like trying to intervene in Russian politics. And they find, her name's Marina, the woman that he marries, the Polish woman. And he's like, all right, you can't keep calling yourself Tsarina because she was still calling herself like Tsarina, which is the consort, the wife of the Tsar. She's like, all right, stop doing that. And also, you cannot go to Tushino. Do not go to this man. Please. She ends up being captured by Dmitri's forces. Well, captured. Her and her dad, likely, willingly, like probably some deal or something. And when Marina goes to Tushino, she's like, oh, yeah, that's my husband. Probably a secret negotiation.
Well, I
unclear
imagine,
on the details.
I feel especially in her case, there's no way she really.
But she was
that.
like, "Oh yeah, that's my husband," and they obviously don't get married
because they're already
married. Yeah. It's Dmitri. What are you talking about? And so,
what an insane!
It's so crazy, dude. It's so crazy. So now they're in Tushino, even more legitimized thanks to Marina, and.
It's crazy that all this starts with a guy who wasn't even Dmitri to begin with, and now we've got second Dmitri,
this is
who's
the
totally
second
the first
Dmitri,
guy.
Being supported by, first of all, I mean, at first he was being helped by false Peter. At this point, he ends up being supported by false Ivan August, and he ends up by false Fedor Fedorovich.
Not to
and they
mention-
have this whole thing where he's like, "Oh yeah, my uncle and my brother, totally."
And then also the Tsarina of the previous Dmitri, who's like, yeah, this is actually the same guy. But it's 3 different people. There's the 8-year-old who actually died. Then there's the second guy who came up. And then now there's the third guy who's totally the same as the first 2.
Exactly, and this is such a bitch. I haven't even talked about like the actual like military leaders and all their factions and all the aristocrats. These are just the people who are pretending to be.
I love how
other
they have a whole
people.
fake family now. They have
Exactly. There are so many more Ruriks than they ever thought. The whole thing with Fyodor is they're like, oh, he's the last of the Ruriks. It's so important that he doesn't die, whatever. But then at this point, they're like, actually, there's so many.
There's
They've
a whole-
just been around.
They're just hiding. There's like 3 of them.
Exactly.
And this pretender government.
There's 4 actually. False Peter's dead now, but he was alive
That's
before. There's all these people who are totally Ruriks. And even the source says like there are like way more than this. So many people claim.
These are the
at
ones
this
that
point.
actually end up mattering.
Yeah, the
politically.
ones who actually end up being like important. But there's plenty of other Cossacks and peasants who are like, oh yeah, me too.
It's apparently this is in the fashion of the day. So
Because
just claim you're some distant relative.
This is the way it works. Again, 2 Dimitris, one more successful than the other in a sense, but they're both claimed czar. They both get actual power.
Yeah.
This thing works.
If you're a peasant, you got nothing ahead of you in life. I mean, it's worth a shot, right?
Or if you're a Cossack who's not going to get caught because you're riding horseback and you're already pretty much like independent from the Russian state at this point. Might as well.
Might as well.
But yeah, so there's this whole 2 czars situation. But the thing is, because he's now has to establish himself as czar, he ends up being more conservative. Because when you have to establish yourself as an actual government, you have to be an actual government, which means like levying taxes and like paying your mercenaries and like ruling and making decisions that not necessarily everybody
Everyone's gonna
likes.
like, yeah.
Because when you are leading a rebellion, it's very easy to get a big coalition because anyone who disagrees with the guy you're fighting with,
Has
let's
a
work
vested
together.
interest in you winning. So
But when you actually have to rule, then it becomes a lot more complicated. There's a lot more nuance. There's a lot more politics involved. It's funny because there's so many like boyars and aristocrats who end up like switching courts. Or they're just like, I don't like Vasily. I'm just going to go over to Tishino. I'm going to be part of his court now. It's so bizarre. But obviously there's also skirmishes between these sides. I
Yeah,
say that
there's
they're mostly peaceful, but
small,
by the standards of medieval Europe.
Yeah, I'm sure there's still border skirmishes and raiding and what you would expect.
And the fighting really starts to pick up again in like 1609, especially when there's like chinks in the armor where people, again, there starts being rebellions against Dmitri as well, alongside the whole
So
rebellion.
both of their tsardoms are just falling apart.
Exactly. There ends up being like in the south, there's this like movement building up.
The third Dmitri, no.
Specifically, like a lot of the mercenaries and Cossacks end up like raiding towns around Tishino. And
Yeah,
so
well, that's how they make their
Dmitri-
money.
Exactly, because he can't really pay them because he's not actually like ruling all of Russia.
Right.
He ends up becoming very unpopular because of this, and that's part of the reason why a lot
Shocker.
of his support diminishes. I wrote here, like, Dmitri had Ivan August, his brother, and Fyodor Fedorovich, his nephew, killed as well. Because he was, again, because of all these people coming up to claim that they're part of the Rurik
It
dynasty.
gets muddled as to who's the really legitimate
Exactly,
one, right?
and so they end up competing with each other. At first, all these imposters work together, but now all these
They're
imposters
like, well, shit,
end up fighting each
He
other.
has a more legitimate claim to me with his fake
It becomes
childhood.
Game of Thrones, but everyone's pretending to be someone else. It's wild. And like I said, there was this rebellion from the south. It's another kind of imposter, but he's just like, he doesn't pretend to be someone else. He just claims that he's a descendant of the Rurikid dynasty, which is like Kievan Rus. So it's like way further back, not Rurikid. And he doesn't claim that his name is something else. He's just like, oh yeah, I have this long line, which kind of imposterish, but every single ancient Roman ever did that. So,
Yeah.
we have to work by a certain standard here. They didn't change his name. But yeah, so now there's rebellions against both Vasily and Tsar Dmitri. In Russian Civil War style, it becomes very complicated very quickly. And also, on top of that, Crimean Tatars started to invade. So, yeah, on top of the rebellion.
The rebellion.
And also, the Polish-Lithuanian kingdom ends up invading as well. So now there's the Crimeans, Polish-Lithuanians, rebellion in the south, 2 competing czars.
Not a good time for Russia. No.
Not a good time to be a Russian. Then again, in most of history, I'm trying to think of most times when it's a good time, to be a Russian.
And
But definitely one of the worst, I think.
gotta be one of the worst times foreign policy wise as well, in terms of just straight up invasions.
Yeah, and because of this, what happens is some factions in these various rebellions, I can't tell which is which. It's like at this point it's starting to get hard for me to track. But they end up signing a deal with Sigismund, with the king of Poland-Lithuania, or sorry, the king of Poland and the Grand Duke of Lithuania.
Right.
Whatever, the king of both. I'll just put it that way. It's simpler. They sign a deal to have his son be Tsar of Russia.
Oh, jeez.
So Vladislav.
Now there's a Pole, too, who's like trying to put himself in charge.
And they end up occupying Moscow for a bit as well, but his power over all of Russia is not, it's not even as strong as the false Dmitry. Or
No, he
Vasily or
can't really
whatever.
assert his authority at all.
Exactly. But nominally, a lot of factions are recognizing Vladislav as the Tsar of Russia.
So, like, in theory, he's the Tsar. In practice, it's run by 600,000 different rebel groups.
Exactly. And then there ends up being like the Seven Boyars, which is another faction. Again, I don't want to get too much bogged down into
We'll do an
the Time
episode
of
maybe
Troubles
sometime
itself.
if people like this.
Maybe sometime. This is already getting long, so I want to get to the end here. Yeah. So that happens. And so his position, the totally real Dmitry, not the third Dmitry, it's him.
It is really the 8-year-old who allegedly died.
Who supposedly
saved
died.
by God.
But was saved by God twice now.
Yeah.
Ends up having to run away because he's so unpopular, and there ends up being like attempts on his life. But he does successfully run away until he ends up being killed by his own bodyguard in 1610. So 1609, 1608 is basically at the peak of his power. 1608, his rebellion comes up. 1609, he becomes a second czar for a good bit, and then he ends up running away. And then in 1610, they say it's like while he was like sledding, so while he was like playing, I guess. Again, I'm completely unsure if that's true.
Clearly,
so
he
much
was very
propaganda.
concerned with his safety.
Very much. But yeah, he ends up being killed by his bodyguard. But for him, that's not exactly where the story ends, because his wife wasn't with him. She was still alive. She was Polish, so she had a lot more protection from like the Polish armies and factions that were being supported by them. The Tsarina, totally the Tsarina, was also pregnant at this time, and ends up giving birth to his son, I believe in 1611. Now, I don't want to get into the specifics on how this ends up because there's a lot of detail, and I don't want to have that on our channel because I don't want to have our channel taken down. But what happens is she ends up being supported by this like Cossack leader. She ends up marrying like a Cossack.
Wait, why would our channel get taken down?
Because of what happens to her 3-year-old.
Oh, it's really messed
child.
up. I see. Okay.
Again, it's in very great detail of how it happens, and I don't want to say. Let's just say
dies horribly.
Publicly executed
Yeesh.
a 3-year-old.
That's pretty messed up.
And again, the way they describe it is like, I wish I could unread it.
So maybe don't look into that too much.
No, like read the book and then like stop when it gets to that point. It's not great.
He escapes. He
escapes. He grows up. Again, the reason for that is that this is in 1614. Marina ends up dying on Christmas Eve of that year as well.
Oh,
she dies after her son is publicly executed. Infant, I should say.
Yeah, really.
But
and this is the end of that.
There's
no one else claiming to be.
Which, and this is 1614. This is after actually they ended up electing the first Romanov, when the new dynasty comes in, when Vladislav stops being the Tsar, when things start kind of like wrapping up.
Who executes the Tsarina and her son? Is it the Romanovs?
There's like a town in southern Russia, which again, Michael I is his name, the first Romanov Tsar of Russia, probably in the interest of having his legitimacy not be questioned by supposedly this Rura kid that's still alive, totally real Dmitry. But you know how I said like Dmitry got killed?
Yeah.
I lied. He's actually still alive.
Oh my God.
He's in the east actually. He's in this.
He's in the Siberian town.
He's actually no, he's not in the east. In the west. Sorry, I'm getting my directions confused now. He's in not in Poland. He's still in Russia. The story's a lot shorter, thankfully. This totally real Dmitry guy ends up showing up in like, I don't know how to pronounce this, Pskov. It's like this place like in modern day Estonia, Latvia.
Okay.
Actually, is it still in Russia now? I should know geography, but anyway,
Around there.
it's very much on like the west of Russia. He ends up claiming he was. He's probably like some like priest or religious person is a lot of the claims, but this one's like not even specific because he ends up not being very important. There's this minor rebellion where they end up like blockading Moscow. Cossacks end up very much threatening the city. This is when like Vladislav is the czar, and then really it's actually being controlled by this council of like 7 boyars. They kind of pick him up to be like, oh, Dmitry is still alive.
Oh my God.
Let's put him on the throne. But this is like
the third
1611. This is the third one.
This is the third fake one.
This is the fourth real one, actually.
Sorry,
because he ends up escaping death again. Like this
guy is clearly chosen by God, man.
No,
4 times.
This guy is Dmitry. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. This guy is Dmitry. He survived all those times. But he ends up being like arrested and hung publicly and like
as one,
mocked by soldiers again far in the west. Apparently he ends up like being caught, helped by the Cossack that married Marina. He ends up being like a part of arresting him because his whole thing is like he adopts this baby to be like, I got the real Rurik kid right here, and I can't have anyone else claiming to be Dmitry. This time the wife didn't recognize Dmitry again. Conveniently, but that's the end of that story. This ran long. I guess this will be a longer episode.
We might just have to, we might just either have to start doing 2-parters, just make them longer, because there's just so much to talk about.
There is so much to talk about. But anyway, what do you think of all that? I spoke for a very long time.
That is insanity. The Dmitry one is impressive to me, because he actually got power, and there's people afterwards who still claim
2 of them got power.
Yeah.
In like different capacities,
and there's 4. There's one real one, and then there's 3 people who claim to be him.
Wait, I don't know what you're talking about. They're all the real Dmitry.
Legend says to this day there are still Russians.
Oh, I am Dmitry. I am.
Actually,
I am
someone is the
Dmitry.
3-year-old son.
Yeah,
the totally legitimate.
I am the son. Actually, I was not. Actually, I have to believe that he died. That was too much graphic detail.
Yeah.
It's like.
I don't know. I didn't read.
You don't want to know.
Probably don't want to know, but yeah. That's, but I now kind of want to read about the times of trouble in Russia. This seems like a fascinating time period.
It is a fascinating time, and I'd love to revisit it because there's so many people in this. There's so many
I also greatly enjoyed the fact that there was a whole pseudo family at some point. There was like fake Peter.
There's like the account says there's like dozens of these people. Many
like
people
at least
claim.
4 of them were recognized enough to be in power. You get like fake Peter.
Yeah, and again, false Peter. Like some of these are like Cossacks who end up doing this because again, it seems like it works and they know they won't get caught. So we have the other ones outside of Dmitry. We have a false Peter, a false Ivan August, and a false Fedor Fedorovich. These are, as opposed to Dmitry, who was a real person, these are all people who
allegedly
never
sons,
existed,
right,
but they're like sons. And I still find it so funny that Dmitry's like, oh yeah, I'm being supported by my uncle and my my brother, or no, my nephew and my brother. Yeah. Totally real, even though I died 2 Dmitrys ago.
Yeah, we're on the second guy who is married to the first guy's wife.
Exactly. That's the other thing, is that Marina goes along with the second one.
That's kind of crazy, though. Like, what was the home life like, man?
I can't begin to imagine.
Do you think they ever talked about it, or they just?
I'm sure they did, but that's the thing. First of all, Vasily Shwisky was talking about one of the reasons why we don't know a lot about the rule of that first false Dmitry is that he ends up immediately destroying a bunch of his documents. He's like, this guy isn't real. Let's destroy it. Let's not show anything.
They don't want,
especially him being so illegitimate.
The first guy seemed like he could have done some good if he had survived. I don't know. He seemed like he could have been
Boris Godunov. I mean, so many people didn't like him.
Not the first guy. The first Dmitry, fake Dmitry.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, the account I have is like very pro Dmitry.
That's the thing.
So I don't know how much I trust that it's real. And again, he only was there for like a year. That's when you get all the good stuff out, and then when you get to your second rebellion, that's when you start like chopping heads.
That's true. That's probably why he's beloved, because it's easy to make a martyr out of a guy who basically.
But again,
did
he wasn't. Maybe he was beloved at his time. We don't know.
That's true.
It's like, this is the thing, especially with this story, is that not only is it a bunch of imposters pretending to be other people, it's other people also saying they're actually this person, but also they did all of this. And it's so much propaganda. It's all about like information, right? The information that this person is definitely Dmitry is fighting. It's like, this is like an information war as well as an actual military conflict.
There's probably a really interesting paper to be written about why there were so many
There
imposters.
definitely
There's gotta
are.
be.
I'm sure. This is for like a video that I'm putting like less effort in than I did with like Adolfo Suarez, but like the more I looked into this, again, I was at first like looking at Wikipedia pages, and I'm like, this is definitely not
That's how you
real.
start. Usually, you go like, oh,
And especially some of these crazy details, I was like,
there's no way.
there's no
But
way.
then you look and there's like, oh, there's at least
Yeah.
substantiated.
And some of it wasn't substantiated, but a lot of it was,
But
and it's super surprising.
That quote in particular about him being his death, is that from, like, did you get that from a primary source? Or is that like a...
I got that from a secondary source, although within it is a quote from
But he's
primary
citing,
sources.
okay, in Russian.
And this is like it's a book from 2004, so it's not like super recent, but he did do his
it's
research.
like, yeah, it's like someone who probably reads more Russian than
again,
either me
very
nor you.
biased in favor of Dimitri's.
But
for
I
some
wonder,
reason.
what political... I guess maybe it's just he's sympathetic to him. I don't know.
I think it's just again, so much of history is like most of history, especially under the Romanovs, said Dmitri was Catholic, crazy person, going on parties, super flamboyant, super
There might be an
Western,
effort to, like...
as opposed to the totally not Western Romanovs.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Who are totally not German. But there's probably an effort to kind of fight back against that other narrative that was the more
Exactly.
accepted one,
And
the official
there's
narrative.
probably some overcorrection in there, and I don't know enough to like parse it, but
You probably have to compare like the Romanov accounts to the...
there's a grain of truth to both, I'm sure.
I'm sure, yeah.
Because again, he did bring Jesuits, so there was this effort, especially among like the Polish parts of
But he
his
wasn't
team.
there long enough for us to really know what he was going to do, right? Yeah.
Other thing, we don't know what would have happened in his reign if he had just jumped to that other building and didn't slip
If that's what
like
happened.
a klutz, which is again, yeah, if that is what happened. Though I think for that one I do believe because there were so many eyewitnesses,
Yeah,
and that is
was
what
like
the
a mob,
account.
and yeah.
And again, there was like
And
merchants who saw what was happening, and a lot of people can attest to seeing his corpse.
Yeah, and I mean, what motive would you really have to lie about how he died, I guess?
Yeah,
Unless you want to say he didn't die. Because he didn't.
he didn't die.
He was
That's the motive, is that he didn't die.
He didn't die.
Like, what do you mean he fell out of the window? That was obviously just some dude.
I mean, the way they describe his corpse, I find it kind of easy to believe that people couldn't identify it. The whole, like, caved his skull in and 27...
Exactly, which that's kind of where they messed up. I'm like, I don't know.
You'd think they...
But again,
I
I
think they'd
think
make a show up, but they didn't. I guess the thing was they didn't want to bring him alive because they were worried the mob would, like, murder them
that's
on
the thing.
spot.
That's why I especially believe he was probably popular in Moscow because, again, Vasily is like no legitimacy. He's never really popular, but he ends up being in power just because of the chaos. He's able to kind of...
But this guy kind of
maximize
builds
his
up this
position.
mythology around him of being ordained by God and
Yeah, I don't
like
know.
kind of a folk hero a bit.
He is a folk hero. Again, warrior prince. In Moscow, apparently, he was pretty popular. Probably better administrator of the city than
The
Boris.
previous guy.
Yeah, Godunov. But, like, I mean, what can you believe? Again, he was still there for a year. So while he was
He wasn't so unpopular.
killed, he wasn't so unpopular that he was overthrown immediately, which I think there's something to say about that.
Which, I mean, is what you would maybe expect if he was like wildly unpopular with the peasantry or the average people, or even the nobles.
Yeah. But it ends up being this conspiracy before he ends up going off to war. Definitely a very, like, taking advantage of the moment.
Right.
Death. It seems like it was definitely minor elements within the court more than it was a popular uprising, which even sources today, they still fall for this Romanov propaganda. that's why
Romanov propaganda.
that's
is
why I have to
wild.
look into this, because there are so many sources, especially if you go like just looking up on website, on history.com,
Yeah.
whatever. There's so many parroting of, for example, like the first Dmitri being this monk who ran away. Some people just say like, oh yeah, he was actually this guy. When it's like, only Boris and people against this guy ever say that he was. In the investigation documents that could be found, they never identify him as anyone. They're like, we don't know who this guy is.
Yeah, because he's probably some he's like
It's not him. Boris, like the first time it's said, Boris proclaims it, and it's based on basically nothing that anyone
he
could
just
find.
says that because it's
So
useful.
like maybe it's true, but don't state it as fact because we don't know.
I wanted to ask you too, were there any that you read that were assumed to be imposters but like were found out to be true? Like, are any of these actually, did anyone actually survive something that was unbelievable?
I didn't look through like every single one, so
But I imagine they
don't know
wouldn't be
for
listed
sure.
among imposters.
That's the thing.
right?
At the list I was looking at,
Because I'd like to know, is there a
probably
historical figure that was like who people thought died but then came back, and actually was the legitimate ruler? Because you never hear about that.
No, and to be fair, if someone was a really good imposter, you wouldn't know it either.
That's true.
I'm sure it's happened in history where some guy claims to be. Imagine if Dmitri made it through to the end.
And they
If he
managed, and they
stayed
managed
czar,
to write the official records that
I'm
way.
sure people in history today would be like, "Oh yeah, Dmitri was actually hidden away and he came back."
I
and
think the
ended up being
fringe
emperor."
theory would be that he was an imposter. We'd be like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's some evidence to suggest he wasn't really Dmitri.
But it's like those
That's
theories
true.
that there's this aristocrat in France who like killed 400 people. He was like a serial murderer.
Oh my god.
There's this like story of that, which I haven't looked into it, so I don't know if it's true or not. But it might be a conspiracy theory. A lot of people say it's like not credible, but there's like this theory that I don't know his name, but there's this French noble who was like the first recorded serial murderer because he killed a bunch of people. But
God.
is that true? Is it not? I don't know.
That's
It's-
true. If they were a good imposter, there would probably be very little records.
And I'm sure it's happened in history.
Oh,
Some guy pretended to be another person, especially when you go like back to ancient.
there's a
records.
lot of history, man. There's a lot of ancient
There's
history.
a lot of
There's a lot of people.
There's a lot of history we don't know.
That's true.
We weren't there to see it.
It'd be really funny if someone really significant turned out to be just a complete fraud. But I doubt that.
Yeah, I mean, especially like among
Well, you have to
know.
doubt that without evidence, because otherwise, I mean, you just suspect everyone.
or else you end up being like that Polish intelligence agent
Yeah.
who thinks everyone is a dead Nazi.
He's a dead Nazi, yeah.
Crazy stuff.
That's
But,
that's fascinating, though.
it is. I mean, that was the end of my story. Is there anything else that you want to add there, or like questions if you have any?
No, well, I mean, not really. I think I asked most of what I was going to ask. The one I was most interested in was whether or not there were people who were thought to be imposters but were later found to be true. Like in history, were considered imposters until there's some evidence that surfaced that.
I mean, honestly, I'm probably gonna revisit imposters because I find them so fascinating.
And there's a lot
and
of
there
them.
are so many more stories to go.
Because I think we even briefly mentioned one in the Fourth Crusade episode. There's a guy who claims to be the dead son of a Byzantine emperor.
Yes, exactly.
And he actually becomes the ruler of.
I'm pretty sure I
Nicaea
saw
for
a
while.
Byzantine emperor in that. I'm pretty sure I saw that was one of the options. I didn't go into it, but yeah, I ended up. Mine was very focused on Russia for some reason, either pretending to be Russian or
I don't know
pretending
why.
to be someone in Russia.
But I mean, when you explain the times of troubles, it's a very much an environment that lends it. Especially after the first guys do it and succeed, then it's like, of course, this becomes the trend, right?
exactly, because it doesn't it doesn't happen all the time, but in an environment where everything's chaotic and there's no real like stable footing anywhere.
There's no good record keeping.
and then
either.
one person who says that he's this person and it works.
Then you go, well, I should try that.
Exactly. Everyone's going to do it. Though, thankfully, it loses its efficiency over time. Even if there are two people who end up... One of them definitely is proclaimed czar. The other one is a pretender, but he still enacts like some authority.
He's like a rival
He has his
czar.
own court. They call him the Brigand of Ticino. And his son ends up being called the Little Brigand. Crazy stuff. Yeah, I think this is going to be our longest episode.
Is it
But,
really?
Yeah. So
I thought
far,
the Spain one would be the longest one.
maybe. Oh, we'll find out.
Teaches us a lot, I think. I think it's a very informative story. And something that's not... It's known, but I don't think it's as well known as it should be.
So, see you guys then.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Goodbye.